So let's start with triggers. Triggers are similar to workflow rules that are defined on a specific object and execute when a record is created or updated. But in this case, triggers are written in Apex. So if you remember, we had done workflow rules, validation rules in the Apex and admin part of it. Sorry, in the Salesforce admin app part of it. Basically, a workflow and all fires. Just a minute, let me just. Basically, the workflow, if you remember, and validation rules fire after a record is created or edited, right? So basically, or changed. So basically, after a record is created, these are firing. But in the case of triggers, you can go to a before. It will run even before a record is created. Like say for a validation rule also is created when it runs when a record is about to be created. So validation rules similar to kind of validation rules, but triggers is more complex than validation rules. So why do we need it? It's similar to your database triggers. Triggers are similar, also works when you delete, undelete, insert, update. Okay, it helps you performs any field updates on the record that is inserted, updated before it is committed to the database. So you can make some changes to the record before it just commits to the database. Simple example can be updating a field on an object. You can use process builder or workflow field, which is fine. But for complex validations, doing an integration call, especially for some complex calculation and validations, you will have to use triggers. Another important thing that people get confused in Salesforce is an important concept is it triggers are bulkified by default. That means you should always assume that you will work with more than one record at a time. That since it's a web environment, it's on the cloud. Many people could be doing a data entry, right? It could not just be just one user. So always assume that multiple records will come in, and Salesforce has basically created architected the triggers in a bulk way. That is, you will get a list of records in the form of Trigger.new or Trigger.old, which is the existing records of an update, and then you work on that. Okay, make the changes on that. You will not query for getting a new set of records and all that. Salesforce will provide you the list of records which are coming in the form of a Trigger.new or Trigger.old. We'll see that as we go. But also be aware that that governor limits which we saw in the previous section is very, very relevant here. Okay, it is very important and it is very relevant over here. Now Trigger.new and Trigger.old, as I told you, is a bulkified list of records that are new copy and old copy of the record. So like this will be the list of records Salesforce provides you. Basically, you should write at one trigger per object. You can write multiple triggers in the. If you go to the object manager, you'll see here that you can take account object. If you go to the object, you can write multiple triggers here. Okay, you can write multiple triggers here, and all will be on that same object. But the ideal way is to write only one trigger, as you see here. Okay, that's how you should do it generally. Alright, it is advisable to write one trigger per object, and be aware that field, if you have a workflow field, remember that you would have had maybe workflow field updates and all. You have to be aware that the trigger will fire once or twice for insert, then once for the field update event. So be aware, if you have a workflow field update also going on and trigger also, you have to revisit it and design it properly. Okay, triggers have to be activated to make it work. Merge statements and upsert can also be handled. Basically, what happens when a merge fires one update and one delete. So like if you have 3 duplicates and you merge them, there will be 1 insert and 2 updates will be fired. Now let's look at the trigger context variables. Now when we write a trigger, Salesforce provides you a set of context variables which you can use to work on the trigger. First and foremost is executing returns true if the current context of the Apex code is in a trigger and not a Visualforce page or web service. So when you write a trigger class, it could be in the trigger or away from the trigger, or there will be some other rule or some class running somewhere, maybe because of an update. You can check whether it is coming from a trigger using X executing. If the trigger is not fired, then in that class which is receiving this will have this is executing false. You can just find out if the context is from a trigger or something else has fired that class. Then you have isInsert, isUpdate, isDelete to check returns value if this trigger was fired due to insert, it was whether it's due to update or due to a delete. Okay, so you can check it in any of the from the Apex, any place in Apex, you can check whether the trigger is in isInsert mode, or its record has got updated, or it's deleted. Now, an important one is there are two events. One is before and after. You can check whether the trigger has fired in the before mode, before record, and you can check whether the trigger is fired in the after mode. The important part here is isInsert, isUpdate, isDelete will be clubbed with isBefore or isAfter. There is each of this for, there is an each isBefore for isInsert, there is a before update, and there is a before delete. Obviously, you don't have an after delete. Okay, so similarly, what happens is you can use this event in the isBefore. Remember, the record ID will not be generated for the record. Okay, so you can still make changes to the record which is going in, but you cannot make any record ID changes. In the isAfter, the ID is provided to you, but the ID is created, so you can do work on some other object. So we will see all of this, understand all of this better. Some more context variables we have is undelete. The trigger was fired when the trigger is recovered from the recycle bin. And the most important ones are these ones like new. Trigger.new list of new version of the SObject records. Now only in the insert and update you will get a new set of records, right? The user is in the interface or created a new record. So those new records in the buffer will come in the form of a trigger.new. It will be there in the update. Similarly, new map is also another map of IDs and records to the new, which maps to the new version of the SObject record. Note that a map is only available again for before update insert, because logical, right? You will not have for in the delete. In the delete, it is you're going to delete an existing record. So there it will be Trigger.old. So similarly, Trigger.old is an old version list of objects. It's an older list. An old map is the ID of records. This map is available only in the update and delete. When you go to the Trigger.isNew, you will not find a Trigger.old because there are no row records in the system, right? So that's what Trigger.size, the total number of records in the trigger invocation. So important ones, new is a list of new records in the buffer. New map is a ID and value. Why do we need this? Is we can search for that and get a value, or we can also use the old list, old map. Old map is ID of old version of object, ID to objects. So let us see all of this. Size is the number of records in a trigger invocation. You can check both Trigger.new.size, Trigger.new.old.size. Let's look at an example trigger.